All right, well, it's 7 o'clock by my clock, so we're going to get started. And I'm going to thank everybody for coming on tonight for Health and Wellness, Mikvah, the original body of water. Um, our guest speaker tonight is Naomi Malka, and I'm going to introduce her in a few minutes. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mindy Steinholz. I'm the chair of Health and Wellness for Women's League for Conservative Judaism. This is just one of our many education programs that we offer to our members. And you can be a member of Women's League through your sisterhood, if you're a member of your sisterhood, which is in turn a member of Women's League, or as an individual member. Over the past several years, and especially this year, Women's League has put together a lot of work and a lot of educational programs for our members. Just last week, we had one on personal conversations. Every day, weekday at noon, we have Psalm study along with Mishaberach and Mourner's Kaddish. I believe we're concluding the Psalm study this week, and then we'll be starting Pirkei Avot. So lots and lots of programs. You can check out the Women's League Week email that comes in every Tuesday or Wednesday usually, which will have all the upcoming programming for you to figure out what suits your needs and your interests. And be in touch with us if there's something that you think that we should know or do. We have a lot of wonderful people here tonight. We have a lot of Women's League leadership here. We have some PIPs, past international presidents here. We have our Women's League director here, Executive Director Rabbi Ellen Wellens-Fields, and I'm going to give the floor for a moment to Debbie Goldich, our international president.
Thank you, Mindy. You can tell we've done this quite a few times. We're a tag team. You said everything I was going to say. So I'll just welcome everyone tonight and echo what Mindy said, and that we have been offering opportunities regularly for engagement, for learning, for a sense of community. And we're just very happy that you're here with us tonight. Everything will be recorded on the Women's League website for you if you have to leave early or if you know someone that has missed the program. So we welcome you tonight, and we're very happy to have Naomi with us. Welcome, Naomi. Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you, Debbie. So I'm going to just say a thank you to Karen Tenesaka, who is manning the Zoom for us tonight and helping make this possible. And I'm going to talk about our guest speaker tonight. Naomi Malka is the director of Adas Israel Community Mikvah. Since 2006, she has been the director there. This is a progressive mikvah inside a conservative synagogue in Washington, D.C. Naomi trained as a mikvah guide at Mayim Chaim in Newton, Massachusetts, and is a core partner of their Rising Tide New Mikvah Network. Naomi created a program called Bodies of Water to introduce kids ages 10 and up to learn about mikvah as a tool for positive body image and healthy decision-making from the Jewish perspective. It's an outdoor immersion program for Jewish summer camps. She earned a master's in Jewish music from the Jewish Theological Seminary in 2000 and a BA in sociology from UCLA in 1991. And the genesis of this program was actually a conversation I had with my daughter. I don't remember where we first heard about it, but we started talking about mikvah and the idea that it was not the things that we had heard about in the text, which was just really about menstruation and after childbirth and before you got married. And so I thought it was something that maybe this was a good opportunity for us to explore through Women's League. So I'm going to turn it over to our guest speaker, Naomi, and we'll just give her a moment to get unmuted. And welcome, Naomi. We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Mindy. I'm so happy to be here. And I was so happy to get your initial email telling me about your program. Debbie, it was really nice to meet you tonight and to hear about all the amazing things that Women's League is doing. So thank you for including me in your amazing calendar of events. Karen, thank you for the tech support tonight. And thank you to everybody else for being here. I love talking about mikveh, so I don't know that an hour and a half will be enough for me. I could really talk about it all day long, but I will try to get everybody off to their the rest of their evenings on time. I also want to thank you all for helping me manage my anxiety about tomorrow. This is really helping me take my mind off of what's going on, and it's good to be with a group of strong Jewish women tonight. I feel like I'm in good company here. So my Jewish education was pretty typical Hebrew school at a conservative synagogue outside of Seattle, Washington. I went to Herzl Ner Tamid. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but we had a 3-day-a-week Hebrew school at that point. And I was kind of a Hebrew school geek. Like, I really liked going. My parents didn't have to make me go. And even though we were in class for 7 or 8 hours a week for all those years, and I went to BBYO and summer camps, I never heard about mikveh. It just never came up for me in any of the classes that I took, in any conversations with anybody. It just didn't happen. And I have a feeling that that is the case for some of you as well. And I have the feeling that you, if you did hear about it, you may have heard about it in a sort of negative way, or in a way that made you feel like, well, yeah, that's a Jewish thing, but it's not really for our kind of Jews. So we're going to unpack all of that baggage tonight. And I'm just really happy that we get to have a program where we get to explore all of it. Before we do that, I want to show you the mikveh that I run, just so you have a sense of what this would be like if we were in person, because normally I do seminars like this and everybody gets to take turns coming into the mikveh space, and we get to see what it looks like and sounds like and feels like. And usually the really cool thing is, usually I have a demonstrator, a person in their bathing suit who is there, and she is doing the whole thing for us in her bathing suit, and we get to see what that looks like. Okay, so this is the mikveh as it used to look. We renovated in 2018, and if you had come for a mikveh tour, a mikveh program, this is what you would have seen. It looks pretty utilitarian. We brought in a little colored rug to cover up the water, the rain tank, and we painted these walls blue, and we had some baskets, but it was pretty drab, and it had the feel of like I don't know, like a swimming pool or a locker room or something. Not much thought was given in 1989 when it was built to the aesthetics and to the experience of what people were coming there to mark. But we were very lucky to have one. This is the only conservative mikveh between Baltimore, Maryland, and Richmond, Virginia. So we were just really glad to have one. And it functioned for all that time, for almost 20 years, 30 years, as the place where all the conservative, Reform, Reconstructionists, and non-Orthodox rabbis did their conversions. And it still does. But what happened in 2018 was we shut down for a few months, hired an amazing set of architects, and this is the new space. So when you come in, you are in front of this mirror, and to your right is the mikveh, and this is what it looks like. And then over to your left, you can't see it in this picture, is a shower area. And it's the same size. The mikveh itself is exactly the same size and shape as it used to be. It's just brilliantly redesigned. And I love good architects. Okay, so that's the place that I'm talking about when I'm talking about our mikvah. Okay, I just wanted you to be able to see that. And I also wanted to say in all the places that I grew up, this is where like I did not learn about mikvah, and I'm sure you could add some places that you didn't learn about it either. My mother didn't talk to me about it. My grandmothers, neither one. I never heard about it from them. As I said, Hebrew school, never. Synagogues, like sermons, classes, nothing. BBYO, Shabbatons, where we talked about a lot of things. We did not talk about mikvah there. So why? Why is that? I have some theories as to why that I'm going to share with you tonight. But my ultimate goal is to change this with your help for the next generation, so that it isn't this secretive thing that nobody knows about or that we have strange associations with. And you'll see how we're doing that already. Okay, so tonight's talk, we're going to start with some Torah study. And I really promised myself that I was not going to bury the lead tonight, that I was going to give you the message of the mikvah up front, okay? And so I'm going to do it right now. The message of the mikvah is that your body is holy. And it doesn't matter what your size is, your shape, the color of your skin, how old you are, how well or how sick you are. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. Your relationship status doesn't matter. Your body is your agent of doing good in the world. It's your vehicle for doing mitzvot. It is what carries you through your life, and that is your life force. It's your connection to God. And the mikvah is a place where you get to experience that holiness. Okay? I just really wanted to be really clear about that message, and we'll come back to it later. We're also going to talk about the experience of immersion, what that's like. It's a very simple ritual. There are 3 full body vertical dunks. And you can say a bracha after one of them, or you could say 2 brachot, depending on what the occasion is, or you could say 3 brachot. And we're going to look at what some of the brachot and some of the readings are. It's very simple. We're going to talk about who's doing this and who isn't doing this. And then we're going to talk about creating change in this really unique pocket of Judaism. Okay, so moving along. We're going to start with a very brief text study. And this should be a really familiar text to all of you. It's at the very, very beginning. And what we're looking for when we read this is what is the role of water in the creation of the world? This was how our ancestors understood the world to have come into existence. And water plays a very, very important role here. I only included the first 3 days. Obviously, more things were created after this. But can somebody read the first 3, unmute themselves and read the first 3 verses?
They would have to say some if they would like to read it in the chat, and I'll unmute them because it's not they can't unmute themselves. So if somebody could raise their hand or volunteer in the chat.
Okay, I'll do it. So
there's someone who just agreed, Judy Geller.
Okay.
Okay. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now the earth was unformed and void, and darkness was upon the face of the earth, of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. So the image that this passage suggests to me is that there is a darkness and there is water, and then there's like the Spirit of God hovering over the water. And I don't know about you, but that is a bit of a creepy image to me. To me, it feels like there's a beach at night, but there's nowhere to stand because it's all water. And there's not even light yet, right? Not until the third verse is there light. And when there's light, then it changes, right? Like then you can see what you're looking at. What happens when light meets water? You get sparkles, you get rainbows sometimes, you get like all those special little glittery lights, and it can be really beautiful, right? So, but before there was even light, there was water. Then the text goes on, and God divides those waters from the waters above. Then God creates the dry land. Finally, there's somewhere to stand, right? And then there's grass growing on the land, there's seeds and trees and fruits, and then the rest of creation unfolds. But what is the role of water in this original text of ours? Somebody raise your hand and unmute.
Okay, Andrea volunteered. I'll unmute her.
And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Our ancestors were a bit confused by the blueness of the sky and the blueness of the water. So when they looked up and they saw a blue sky, they thought that that meant that there was water above. And that is what the second paragraph, the verses 6, 7, 8 are describing. What I really want to focus on here is that the water was God's partner in creating the world and everything in it. That water itself was never created. It pre-existed everything. And when we look at water in that framework, it becomes holy. It becomes like this sacred substance that God used to pull everything else out of. And whether we're going to read this text literally or we're going to, bring our evolution mindset to this as a myth, we all agree that life came out of the water, right? And so to have a water ritual, which is honestly something that every culture does, we are not the only people who interact ritually with water. Everybody does it. It makes it, it ties it, it connects us when we're in that ritual to this moment of creation and to the beginning of life on earth. Because if you think about it, there really isn't any new water. All the water that's on earth has been here forever and ever. And when it's in a mikvah, it's just like a photograph of a stop motion of where it used to be, right? It used to be rain, and before that it was in the clouds, and before that it was in the ocean. So when it's gathered in a mikvah, it's going somewhere else afterwards. It's always cycling. So when we go into this cycle It is a chance to remember the miracle of creation, to remember how God created the world, and to appreciate the role of water in it. Okay, what are some other water stories that we know from the Torah and from Jewish tradition? Put your answers in the chat. What are other water stories? There's lots of them. I'm going to stop that share so I can see the chat. Miriam and the well, thank you. Noah's Ark, the floods, yes. Yeah, what else? Moses in the basket, splitting the Red Sea, the water drawing ceremony for Sukkot, absolutely. What else? Hand washing ritual, absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else? Yes, those are all very, very prominent water images. Think also in every day in Shacharit, we say Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea, about the water splitting, right? That is present in our tefillah every single day. Rabbi Ellen says Birkat Kohanim and Levi'im washing Kohanim's hands. We're getting there. We're getting to the Levi'im and Kohanim, I promise. Thank you. Prayers for rain and dew, right, on Shemini Atzeret. Absolutely, absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so other than what Rabbi Ellen brought up, not many of our core texts and stories about water are from the book of Leviticus, right? Oh, Tashlich, that's a good one. Most of them are from other books of the Torah. And we're going to go into this difficult book of Leviticus for a minute, because this honestly is where mikveh education usually starts. Okay, so let me get you back to Jonah, that's a good one. Yeah, definitely not from Leviticus. Definitely not. Okay, I'm gonna share my PowerPoint back with you. Okay. Okay. Oh. Okay, here we are deep in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is the middle book. It's the shortest book, and it's the hardest one to relate to. It has all kinds of laws pertaining to sacrifices that we no longer offer. It's very complicated. It has a very difficult ethic. It's very exclusive. It's trying to keep all kinds of people with disabilities and with unacceptable relationship status out of the leadership. It is a holiness code for the Israelites when we were a people in survival mode. And this is our later ancestors' best attempt to keep a sacred space in the middle of the desert. The sacred space was the Mishkan. And in order to go from the Mishkan, from the wilderness outside into the Mishkan, whoever was going in, which was the Levi'im and the Kohanim, had to prepare themselves, and they had to reset their souls from the chaos that they experienced out in the wilderness. And I know we all experience chaos in our lives. We're experiencing a lot of it right now. To offer a sacrifice, one had to reset one's soul. And there was some I would say, low-tech ways of doing that. And this text right here is an example of the kind of, I would say, process, and I would also say obsessive process that the transition required. So this is just an example of a male who would be required to to immerse. And I will read this out loud. And you'll see when I'm reading it, what I want you to pay attention to is what's the role of water here in this text, okay? No man of Aaron's offspring who has an eruption or a discharge shall eat of the sacred donations until he is clean. If one touches anything made unclean by a corpse, or if a man has an emission of semen, or if a man touches any swarming thing by which he is made unclean, or any human being by whom he is made unclean, whatever his uncleanness, the person who touches shall be unclean until evening, and shall not eat of the sacred donations unless he has washed his body in water. As soon as the sun sets, he shall be clean, and afterward he may eat of the sacred donations, for they are his food. Okay, this is a completely different role of water than we saw in Bereshit, in Genesis, right? And here it's part of a cleansing, but it's also part of what the Torah calls tameh, if somebody is unclean, and then how they become clean. And the word doesn't appear here, but the word for clean after, no, it is in the first one, is tahor. Tameh and tahor are the Torah's words for not ready to enter the Mishkan and then ready to enter the Mishkan. And water was just one way of becoming ready. There are other ways too. So to enter into the holy spaces of the Mishkan and later the Beit HaMikdash, these are some of the things that you had to do. Depending on what your encounter was out in the wilderness and the chaos, you might have to wash your clothes, or you might have to burn them. If they were like beyond hope, you just burn them and put on new clothes. Might have to shave your head. Might have to spend some time outside the encampment in solitude, like kind of meditating, right? Not near anybody else. And then immersing in water is another way to prepare to enter these sacred spaces. Okay, I can't go into all of Jewish history, but after the destruction of the temple, most of these practices fell by the wayside, right? Because we weren't offering sacrifices anymore. And ritual immersion was one that stayed with us throughout the centuries. And over the many, many years of rabbinic conversations and framing it as a mechanism for conversion to Judaism, it also kept some of its, these are the traditional uses that it kept and acquired throughout the centuries until now even, okay? So these are 5 traditional uses of mikvah. One is married women going on their monthly cycle. That's me, and I'll tell you more about that as we go. Spiritual preparation before Shabbat and holidays. Very traditional thing to do on a Friday afternoon or before Yontif, or especially before Yom Kippur. Brides or grooms coming before their wedding. Very common thing to happen. Weddings are sometimes Saturday nights or Sundays, Thursday afternoons, Friday mornings. There's a lot of brides and grooms at our mikveh. As I said, conversion to Judaism. It didn't happen a lot throughout history. It's a lot more common these days. This is how it happens. This is the final step. This is the last gateway that we ask our conversion students to walk through before they officially become Jewish. And then some people have a minhag, a custom of immersing new dishes in a mikveh before they bring them home to their kosher kitchen. So I will pause here for any questions, and you can put those in the chat too. Am I saying that men had a ritual to be clean also? Yes, it was the same ritual. Those were the same the requirements were the same. And in the time of the Mishkan, actually, women were not the only ones who were required to immerse. Men had to immerse for very similar reasons than as women did. Are there other questions so far? Okay. I have a question for you. What messages did you hear about mikveh when you were growing up or more recently? What are your associations with it? What is the baggage around it that you have? Because we all have it. So let's just say it. Just put it in the chat. And Mindy, you're raising your hand. Just put it in the chat. Let's add it there. I love this part. I used to be afraid of what people were going to say. Now I'm like, I'm fight it. Oh yeah, Ellen, we're going to get to all of that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, mikvahs can be dirty. Yes, that's a very common misconception. I hope the pictures of ours did away with that. Because there were no progressive mikvahs, it was considered only for the Orthodox. Exactly. It's always been considered something that Orthodox women do and not really for us, unless we're going to do it maybe before we before we get married, but not everybody gets married, right? Picky matron supervising and inspecting. Oh, that, I dressed up as her last Purim, I just want you to know. Because that's like what, people associate. Yes, that you'll somehow be inspected. You have to be called kosher, that you're like some kind of brisket or something. Yes. Husbands would be intimate with wives. I think you mean husbands would not be intimate with their wives until they went to the mikveh. Yes, that is definitely something we all heard. Your great grandmother, oh, I can't go up. Or can I? Oh yeah, okay, here we go. Oh yes, menstruation is unclean. It definitely gave us that message. Mindy, your great grandmother was asked if she would bring your grandmother to a mikveh before her wedding, and she said, no, it's too dirty. No way, I'm not gonna do that, right? That like core Jewish practice. Conservative women only used mikveh for conversion or before a wedding. Yep, that is a very commonly held belief. Marcia, everything was surrounded the issue of men and women being separated, that you cannot be touched by your husband. Oh, right. So here we're getting into Nida, right? Nida is the rhythm of a husband and a wife separating for 2 weeks of the month, and then it's assumed that she's the one that immerses, and then you're clean enough for him to touch you, right? So you weren't clean before you went, and then going to the mikveh cleans you somehow, right? Okay, thank you. Parties of women sitting in a special party room as the bride immerses in a mikveh. Oh, Barbara, I think you've probably been to Israel and seen that there. I'm not sure, but that's where I've seen that. That's nice. Rita says having to clip your nails. I know, right? And what if you have acrylics? Then what? Then you just don't go to the mikveh? There's answers for all this stuff. That's a really good one, Rita. Mindy said, your great grandmother said, take a bath and say a prayer. That's hilarious. Eileen wanted this experience, so she went. Yeah, so she went before Yom Kippur. And good for you, Yeshikoch. Okay, and then Rabbi Ellen says, in Brooklyn, they also have a bride's party at the mikveh, yes. And Doreen's daughter-in-law immersed in a river before the weddings instead. That's a mikveh, there you go. A river, an ocean, a lake with a tide, any moving, flowing, living water is a mikveh. An indoor mikveh is a compromise that a community builds for safety and for comfort, especially in the colder months, right, to be able to carry out this mitzvah all year round. Thank you for all of those associations. Those were fantastic. Oh, Andrea has one more. Andrea thought that there were many old women who watched a naked woman. Oh, so like there's like a committee of old women who were like watching one young naked woman immerse. Oh, we have good imaginations. That's not how it is. It's really not how it is. I have to tell you a couple things. At our mikveh and at the other progressive ones like ours, you can go by yourself for any reason other than conversion. You need a witness for conversion because it has, halachic implications for the rabbis that sponsored it and everything, and for the person who's converting. But anything else, you can go completely by yourself. You can pick up the key at the front desk of Addis Israel, go downstairs by yourself. You could have a guide. You could have a mikvah guide, somebody like me or one of my awesome volunteers there to either show you in and show you what to do, or to let you get ready by yourself, get into the water, and then she would come into the room and just help you with the brachot if you wanted help and make sure that you were doing everything kosher. But you don't have to have her. You can do this completely by yourself. Also, kids always want to know if you can wear your bathing suit when you do this. And we say yes, because we want kids to have this experience. We want it to be a positive experience. And we looked at the Rambam text about what you have to be wearing or not wearing when you go in the mikveh. And it turns out that for something to not be permissible in the mikveh, it has to cover more than half of your body, and you have to not want it there. And a bathing suit does not fall into either of those categories. So we say yes to bathing suits. And acrylic nails, Rita, I'm happy to tell you, they're okay in the mikveh. You don't have to take them off because of the Rambam's view of it. And there's just so much that happens at the mikveh that is so far and beyond our stereotypes that I could talk about that all day too. But I want to tell you how I first learned about it, because I think that this is what we need to change. This is what has to be different for the next generation. Because I heard about it in a very Orthodox setting, and to me, it was different. So after college, after my freshman year of college, I signed up to go on a summer program in the Catskills that was called the Ivy League Torah Study Program. And I didn't understand when I was signing up for this program that it was run by Chabad. I didn't know what that little bet hay in the corner of their promotional materials meant. I just thought that it sounded like an interesting program, like a summer camp where I would learn some Torah. And they were even offering a stipend, and I figured, okay, this is going to be my job for the summer. I'll get to learn Torah. My parents thought that I was really kind of crazy for doing this, but I did it anyway. I flew out to New York. I took a bus from Port Authority up to the Catskills, and I got off the bus, and in the parking lot, I saw men in black hats. It was Friday afternoon. They were wearing their Shabbat streimels, and the women coming over to greet them and to greet the other students that were getting off of the bus. And they all had wigs on and long dresses, and the kids ran up to the men to hug them and kiss them and say hello, and the women just stood off and waved and said hello, but there wasn't any kissing or touching going on between the men and the women. And I looked back, and I kind of wanted to get back on that bus. I really didn't know where I had landed. And the bus pulled away, and I stayed for 6 weeks. And I learned a lot that summer, a lot of interesting practices and Jewish texts that I had never encountered before. And I met some really wonderful, wonderful people. And one of the women who I learned with was a Rebbitzin. She was married to, I think, the head rabbi there. And she said that mikveh is something that Jewish women do that you have to be married. When you do it, it's a secret. It's a water ritual. Nobody knows that you're doing it except your husband and a woman who's watching you do it. She said it has something to do with your period and when you are done with your period, but she was very vague about that. But what she was super clear about was that it helps you and your husband have better sex. And I really had no idea what she was talking about, but I was just intrigued because I was like, oh, like Judaism has something to say about menstruation, first of all, about water, second of all, and about sex. Like I had never really heard about that either. So from that, I understood that like, of course, the conservative environment that I grew up in was uncomfortable talking about it. It had to do with bodies and with sex, and that wasn't something that we ever discussed in Hebrew school at Herzl Ner Tamid. I mean, it just never, ever came up. But in an Orthodox environment where halacha takes over every part of one's life, of course it's going to take over that part too. Like that actually made some sense to me why I learned about it there. But the truth was that I didn't really think about it too much for the next 10 years. I didn't meet the person who I was going to marry till I was in Israel 10 years later. I didn't think about it, but I had bookmarked it. I had always kind of kept it in the back of my mind, like, well, there's that mikvah thing, and that sounds interesting, and maybe that's a part of a Jewish marriage. So when I met my future husband, Chaim, in Jerusalem, and we got to a point when we realized that we were probably looking at marriage. You have some conversations about what Judaism is going to be like in your home, and neither one of us knew exactly what mikvah was or why we thought that it was important, but we both had that association. And so, when we talked about, well, what would Shabbat be like if we lived together, and what kind of kosher kitchen do you want to have? We just agreed that mikvah would be something that we would do. And I had no idea that was over 20. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary. I had no idea then that I would be this like mikvah professional. So I'm going to tell you how all of that happened too. But I want to pause and see if there's any questions while I get you back there. And Rabbi Ellen says, is the ruling about acrylic nails being okay at mikveh universally accepted? I believe it's accepted in all of the progressive rising tide mikvahs where the person who's immersing has agency over their own preparations and where there's not a inspection happening. In some Orthodox mikvahs, you can also tell the person who's there as a witness, I know I have nail polish on and I'm going to immerse with it anyway, so you don't have to remind me, thank you. That is absolutely possible. Okay. So then my practice kind of developed, okay? That was how I heard about it. Then I went before my wedding. My husband went also, we went separately, but I was the one who continued to immerse every month. And at the beginning, we lived in New York, and I went to the mikveh on 73rd Street, I think, right next door to a comedy club. And it was that mikveh that you've all described. The woman who ran it was like a Polish Holocaust survivor. She and her sister ran it together, I think, and they were very strict. It was beautiful. It was absolutely sparkling clean, I have to say. It was not dirty in the least, but they were those like very stereotypical mikvah ladies right out of central casting. When we moved to DC, we came here the week before 9/11. I found the mikvah at Addis Israel. I just called around, and they were the ones that were the friendliest and the most welcoming. And I started coming here, and I came every month. I took off when I was pregnant with my sons, and then while I was nursing, while I was not on a cycle. And then about 5 years later, they asked me if I wanted to run the mikveh here. And it had always been run by somebody who was a Jew by choice. And I was the first person, I think, in a long time who wasn't bringing that experience of it. I was bringing more of the monthly NIDA immersion experience to it. And when they asked me if I wanted to run it, I said, okay. I had 2 little kids at that point. I didn't really have a job, and it sounded easy. It was, it's actually located in the synagogue right down the hall from the Gan, and the boys were going to the Gan. And so the person who had run it before said, you can just schedule the appointments for when you drop them off and when you pick them up, and it'll be like it's almost like a volunteer job for you. It will be easy, it will be fun. So I thought it would be other women like me, or conversions, or adopted babies and brides once in a while. That's what I thought I was saying yes to. And so she gave me the keys, and she showed me the plumbing and where the rainwater comes in. Rainwater is a really important part of the whole kosher construction of a mikveh, and how to let that into the flow and to the tap water. She told me where to put the donations, and they transferred the mikveh phone number to my cell phone. And I waited a long time. I waited like 2 weeks for the phone to ring. And I thought it was going to be, a rabbi or an administrative assistant to a rabbi calling to set up a conversion. And the first phone call that I got was from a woman who could barely talk. I answered the phone, and she was like sniffing and coughing. And I said, can I help you? And she said, I need to use the mikveh. And I said, can I ask what you want to use the mikveh for? And she said, I just lost my son and my father in the same car accident, and I'm drowning in grief, and I need something to wash this away. And I said, of course, come. So she came the next day, and I had no idea how to attend to her. I had never received any kind of training for that. I certainly hadn't received any chaplaincy training. And I honestly didn't know how she connected what had just happened to her with mikveh. And it took me years and years to unpack that phone call. And I finally got back in touch with her. And when we renovated, after we reopened, we had a celebration called Mayim B'Sasson. And it was a storytelling event. And she came and she told her story and the whole backstory of the accident and of her experience in mikvahs before that. And she was one of our storytellers, and there was not a dry eye in the house. So from that very first phone call, I started to see just like a glimpse of the possibilities for mikveh. And I started to see like what the usage was like. And at that point, like 85, 90% of what was happening at our mikveh was conversions. And things like her use of it, I didn't realize would be fairly rare at that point. There was some women, I think somebody in the chat said that they had heard of it for post-divorce. That was happening occasionally, and like at the completion of chemo. I remember a few of those things at the beginning. What I have seen since then in the last 14 years has been this amazing flourishing of creative mikveh use. At the same time, two things are happening. One is that the number of conversions is staying the same throughout all these years. There's always around the same number, around 200 conversions a year in this area. So that's changed. The percentage of that, of the total use has gone way down, but the number there has stayed the same. And the other thing that has really grown is more traditional uses. Those 5 uses that I was talking about before, like married women, and now it's married people going on their monthly cycle. It's not just women. Now it is more people coming before their wedding. Now there's more people who are using it in keeping a kosher home and coming before the holidays. So all of those traditional uses are also on the rise. And that is a really, really gratifying thing for me to see. But it took a long time. It took a long time. It took, I would say, 7 years for the culture here to start to change. Because at the beginning, people didn't want to talk about it. Like there were people who, board members of the synagogue who, were so very, very passionate about Adas Israel, about conservative Judaism, about Judaism in general, and they didn't know that there was a there, or some of them did, but they didn't know where it was. Some of them thought, okay, it's just for conversions. That's why it's here. There's a whole history behind why the mikveh was built at Adas, and if we have time, I can tell you later. But since then, there's been so many beautiful and heartbreaking moments that I'll share a few of them that I've experienced over the years. So 3 years ago, there was a woman in our community in her 30s whose apartment caught fire, and she was in the apartment. And not only did she lose almost all of her possessions, but she also was burned. It was a very traumatic event, obviously, and it took her a long time to recover from it physically and to get her insurance settlement and to go back to work and professionally to recover from it. On the 1-year anniversary, she and 2 friends came to the mikveh, and she brought things with her that reminded her of the night of the fire, and she put them in the water with her, which I just thought was so powerful because, water and fire, and she had the key to the apartment that the lock had melted. It no longer even worked, but she had the key with her. That went in the water with her. She brought coffee beans because she remembered that night when she was out on the street that her neighbor brought her a cup of coffee. And so it was this totally sensory experience for her. And the immersions, the water was almost secondary, but the point is that it is a place of healing, and that she used the water creatively and she used it symbolically, and it was the way that she put the past behind her. It'll never be completely behind her, but it was one way that she put up a milestone in her healing from that moment. Thank you, Rita. Yeah. I know I felt so sorry, but I was also I felt so privileged also. Oh, you're sorry, you have to go. Okay. It was a privilege for me to witness that immersion and so many others. There was also a young man in our community whose father had been sick, and who his father lost the ability to speak before he died, but he wrote his son a letter, and on the envelope it said "for later." So he didn't have to he couldn't keep it. He knew that he didn't want to keep it at home. So he gave it to the rabbi, and the rabbi kept it for him. And on the 1 year, it's funny, another like 1 year mark story. On his father's yahrzeit, he went to the rabbi's office and they read the letter together. And afterwards, he came immediately to the mikveh and immersed. And I don't know about you, but I can't hear. It's very difficult for me to hear men cry without crying myself, and that was very emotional. I was outside, but I heard so much. It was very, his emotions were just overtook the whole room. One other really moving story that I'll tell you is about a woman who was reaching her 80s, and she had been born in France during World War II, before World War II. And during the war, her parents put her into a convent, and she was kept by the nuns there during the war. And when she was 12, I think, they asked her to be baptized, and she said, okay, but she always felt terribly guilty for saying okay. I mean, she felt at that point, of course, that she didn't have a choice, that they were keeping her alive, and she wanted to please them, but she always felt bad about having made that decision, and she carried that guilt around with her for many, many, many years. And she came to this country and married a Jew, and they had 3 Jewish children, and one of her daughters was also told this story at our reopening event about how her mother always felt uncomfortable, either in synagogue or at home when they were lighting Hanukkah candles, and they never knew why her mother got so quiet during these moments. And then she said she wanted to speak to the rabbi. So she went to the rabbi when she was in her 80s and said, I have carried this burden around my whole life, that I converted to Catholicism and I, accepted their faith, and I never should have done that, and I feel terrible. And together, she and the rabbi came up with the idea that she would immerse in the mikveh as a way of symbolically leaving this burden behind. And she was very old and very frail, and her daughter went in with her. They both wore bathing suits, and her daughter helped her immerse. And she read what they had written together. She and the rabbi had written what they called a vidui, like a confessional, and she spoke it out loud in her shaky German accented voice in the mikveh. And she and her daughter were both crying, and when they emerged, she said, I feel clean. And afterwards, like the next day, I think it was Hanukkah again, and they asked her at the family candlelighting, how did you feel about the mikveh? And she said, last night was the first night in my whole life that I didn't have nightmares. So these are all like beautiful and heartbreaking stories, and they happen here all the time. There is no mikveh immersion that is just by the book or plain. Even for those of us who've incorporated this into a rhythm in our lives, I go every month, and for me, every month is different. And yes, I have some months where I do it slower and I'm singing more, and I'm maybe singing the blessings to the melody of one of the upcoming holiday songs, and some months where I just say the blessings and I get out and I do it very quickly. Somebody asked what the blessing is. Starts like all the others, Baruch Atah Adonai, and it ends with V'tzivanu al ha-tevilah. Tevilah is immersion. Litbol, lamed, tet, vet, lamed, vav lamed, is to dip or to immerse. And you might know it from the 4 questions, matbilin. That's the bracha for it. If it's the first time you go in a mikveh, you say what you say for the first time of anything. You say she'achianu. These blessings have also been expanded, and I'm excited also to show you some of the other reasons or occasions when people are coming to the mikveh and what they're saying when they're here. So here is a ceremony developed by Ma'im Chaim, which is a mikveh and education center in Newton, Massachusetts. And this one is written for the occasion of a parent coming before their son's bar mitzvah. Does anybody want to unmute and read a little bit of this out loud? Can you see it? Unmute and raise your hand so Karen can unmute you.
Yeah, please. Okay, Toby. Okay, I'll unmute Toby.
Okay. As my son grows from a child to a man, teach me how to hold him close and let him go, how to protect him from the world and expose him to the world, how to guide him and trust him. Give me strength, God, and confidence and wisdom. Watch over him, God. Teach him to believe in himself and to have faith in goodness. Give him courage, humility, happiness, and the love of good friends. Bless our family, God, with health and peace, with joy and with love. Amen.
Thank you. Stay unmuted, Toby, because I want you to read a little bit more in a second, but I'm going to walk everybody through this. Then it says like the kind of choreography of what to say when. So this is what you say before you enter the water. And this is talking about the moment of a bar mitzvah, before the bar mitzvah. And then here's the bracha that another formulation of the bracha, asher kitzanu b'tivila b'mayim chayim. This uses slightly different language than v'tzivanu because this is an extra halachic kind of immersion. This doesn't have the same bracha as something that is a halachic immersion. Then a second immersion with the Shehachianu, and then a third immersion, and then a closing kavanah. And this is my favorite paragraph right here. Will you read this one, Toby?
Sure. Protect my child from my secret wish to make him over in my image and illusions. Let him move to the music that he loves, dissonant perhaps to me.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to show you another one, another occasion. This one is for healing. So this one is a ceremony that I developed because this one really represents my experience at the mikveh. And what happened for me is after, I think 5 or 6 or 7 years of going every month when I was on my cycle, I came to realize that what I was experiencing at the mikveh was a place of healing and peace in my long-term struggles with my body image, with feeling okay. I have dealt with an eating disorder and some pretty horrible thoughts and feelings about the way that I look since I think I was 9 years old. And I realized that when I was in the mikveh and when I was doing this ritual, it was the only time when I felt okay. The only time when I didn't feel like this kind of screaming criticism of myself. And that started to really go off label for me. Like, this was not what the Rebbitzin at the Chabad summer camp was talking about. Like, she did not describe this. This was like an unintended side effect. And I started to realize how powerful this was for me. And I wrote this ceremony that calls on Psalms. If you've been, it sounds like you have been reading Psalms, you might recognize some of these phrases from there. And I'll make that bigger for you. Yeah. Okay. I'll read the Hebrew, and then Toby, are you still unmuted? You want to read the English?
Sure.
Okay, all right. תהום אל תהום קורא לכל צינוריך, כל משבריך וגליך עלי עברו.
I have spent too much of my life feeling disconnected from my own body. I have compared it to other bodies, criticized my appearance, and abandoned the holy work of staying connected to God. I have felt shame and sadness. I envision these feelings as a handful of stones, which I carry now with me into the water.
Thanks. Shuva Adonai et shivitenu ka'afikim b'negev.
Dropping these stones down to the bottom of the mikvah, I leave them behind me. I release myself from the pain that has held me down. I forgive myself for all of the negativity. May my struggles recede, and may God grant me soothing peace.
Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto.
Give thanks to God, for God is good. God's love endures forever. My final immersion symbolizes a step toward peace and acceptance. May this moment of integration between mind and body and soul be long-lasting and healing. May I find joy. May I emerge from this ancient rainwater connected to the source of all life.
And then the two brachot that I was referring to before.
Lovely.
So this ceremony for body positivity, this is the core of a program that I created called Bodies of Water. And what that program does is it invites participants. We started off with girls ages 10 and up with their mothers or grandmothers or a female adult. Now we do it for all genders. It's not just women anymore. The participants get to watch one of these demonstration immersions by somebody in her bathing suit. We make sure that that person who's in her bathing suit does not have a commercially perfect body that is going to intimidate anybody there. We're looking for people who are zaftig and loving it. And who are really comfortable being seen in a bathing suit. And we might even have candles set up and, you know, change the lighting a little bit, but that is the core piece of the program. Then they also get to do a mindful eating with brachot exercise, talking about the holiness of food and how bringing awareness to what we eat, even, you know, especially maybe on Shabbat and holidays, is a way of honoring our bodies. And then we'll do a little taste of Jewish yoga. I'm not a yoga person, and I don't eat mindfully a lot of the time, honestly. But those pieces of the program seem to kind of fit the cultural moment that we're in. And putting mikvah into that context really helped people in our community understand what it was that I was talking about, and it helped us get funding. We got funding for Bodies of Water from the Tikkun Olam Women's Foundation that's run from the Federation here. And that program ran in its first year, I think in 2014. It ran for 3 years. And then it has just become the demonstrations and things like that have become the standard part of what we do. And we're now integrated with the Jewish Mindfulness Center of Washington, which is also an Adas Israel program. But they came to embrace mikveh as a mindfulness practice too. So that's been really exciting for me, and for our community. And we got to, you know, really present this as a tool to a few thousand people over the last few years, and we see them coming back. We see this working. We see it. We're not, you know, collecting evidence as clinicians, but we're seeing people integrate mikveh into their healing, and not just for body image and eating disorder. I mean, that's a reflection of my experience of it, but for all kinds of struggles and all kinds of life transitions. And I think that what we do when we talk about mikveh as a ritual of transition is we actually return it to its biblical Levitical framework, where it functioned as a way to go between chaos and order and the wilderness and the Mishkan. And it's a way of resetting our souls. And it is for everyone. We're not exclusive about this. We're making this, you know, the bar for who can participate in this is very surprisingly low. Like, you know, so much of Judaism, I think, is like intellectual, and you have to have a certain degree of literacy to understand the text or the Hebrew, or you have to know the melodies. And if you know all that, you don't think about how high the bar could be for somebody else. But here, all you have to do is have a body, and that's pretty unique, right? We don't have too many embodied rituals in Judaism. We have a few. We, you know, if you think of some, you can put them in the chat. The most prominent one I can think of is tefillin, right? That is very, very embodied. That really is like wrapping the text of the Shema and V'ahavta around your arm and around your head, and attaching all of that that theology to your body. But there are a few. I don't know. I mean, I suppose, yeah. Well, Brit Milah. Talit also, yes. Wrapping yourself in a talit is a very, very embodied experience for sure. Brit Milah, you know, putting, and a kippah, absolutely. Yeah, those things absolutely are embodied. But I don't know, I feel like, and it's funny that this is, our mikvah is in Washington and Mayim Chaim is in Boston. These are kind of wonky, like intellectually, Jews here are pretty intellectually identified. Yeah, fasting, very, very embodied for sure. And yet, like, these mikvahs have really flourished in these cities. And I think that is saying something. And I think that you don't have to come at Judaism through a heady approach. You can come at it with your body and with joy, and experience it on so many different levels. I'm gonna tell you one other story. There was a woman who accompanied a tour group of middle schoolers to the mikveh, and you know, they came and they saw it and they asked great questions, and she raised her hand and she said that 10 years previously, she had converted at our mikveh. And she said that on the day of her conversion, if the rabbis had said, Mazel Tov, you're Jewish now, you passed all of our questions in the Beit Din, and you, here's your certificate, and Mazel Tov. She said if she had just taken the certificate and gotten in her car and driven away, it would have been one of the greatest still days of her life. But she said that the fact that she got to go into the mikveh at the end of that process before she got into her car was how she knew that she was a Jew. That there was something about that embodied experience and going through this whole physical transition that was how she knew. It wasn't abstract anymore for her. I mean, certainly many parts of the mikveh are symbolic and somewhat abstract, but there's also the concrete steps that you're doing and the overwhelming physical experience of being underwater that that can't be denied. So I love her story. I always tell her story because it just shows the power of what we experience with our bodies. We kind of know with a different knowing, a different sense than what we learn or just what we say even. So a couple more things that I want to share with you, and then I want to ask you some more questions. This is a beautiful graphic that is a part of a booklet that I would have given you if you were here at the mikveh to in a live thing, and I can send you a link to this whole document. But I just think this encapsulates a lot of what I'm talking about and what the possibilities for mikvah are in a really cool way. So this is one of my favorite things to share. And then I want to also share with you one other thing. This is to recap what I've learned about the mikvah. I've been practicing it for 20 years. It's like I'm married. This is a ritual of transition. We all go through transitions. Our lives change. We are not the person that we were a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago. We are, and we're also growing, right? And it's a way of acknowledging our growth, acknowledging the places we still have to grow, and putting up milestones, moving mindfully from one part of our life to another. Number two, this has become a source of healing for many people and for me. This has done, I would say, more for me than therapy has done. I wouldn't not do therapy. This isn't, the only thing, but this has been just as powerful for me. And also is that there's a culture shift that takes time and it's waiting to happen. And there are people in your communities who are waiting for this to happen. There are kids growing up without this who could really benefit from it in their lives and in their futures. So I have some questions for you. And these I want you to take with you, kind of put these in your pocket and think about them, not just tonight, but as you go forward. I think you're the perfect group of people to ask these questions of. What would it take for your community to consider mikvah to be a core Jewish practice for your community? I mean, not like something that other people do, but to respect it, to provide access to it, to educate about it. What would it take for mikvah to have an equal standing with Shabbat and Kashrut or other core Jewish practices, how you define them? What would it take for your community to establish a mikvah? Do you live in a place where you have access to a beach where this is already happening? And is that enough? Do you need more private and protected surroundings? Does your community have a mikveh that is underutilized or half built? Sometimes communities get a little bit stuck on like this hierarchy of needs, and I'm here to tell you that communities are not like Maslow's creatures. It's not like, oh, well, we can't even put up a sukkah, so how can we build a mikveh? They're all rituals are different, and none are more sustaining than others, but mikveh is a very, very, very powerful one, and you don't know before you build it what will happen when it's there. So think about and talk to us. I mean, I'm in this new mikveh movement of progressive mikvahs called Rising Tide. We're here to talk about how you do this, how you get boards together, how to form interest committees, how to do surveys and find out, is it right to do it under the grounds of the JCC, or should one of or two of the synagogues, get together and talk about buying land for it. We've all done these processes, and we want to help you and support you do this. And my last question is, what would it take for a new generation of kids, Jewish kids, to grow up with a different understanding than the one that we did? My feeling is that we just have to normalize it. Role models have to talk about it. We have to de-emphasize the role of sex and the taboos around blood, but that we have to talk about it, and we have to degenderize it too. We have to make it for everybody. It's going to stay secretive and mysterious if it's just a women's thing. I really believe that. Schools need curriculum, and some has been written and more is being written. I teach 6th grade, and my 6th graders all learn about the mikveh. Jewish summer camps. This is the perfect place to do bathing suit on whole bunk immersions or ways to get ready for Shabbat. This is happening. Okay, this is another way that another generation of kids is going to grow up with a different understanding. And I'm sure that you have more ideas. So I am happy to just have a discussion now. We can take it off of chat. I'm going to look and see what was in the chat. I will talk about COVID, but I don't love to. And yeah, share with me your ideas about what we talked about and about how to create this change. Yes. Okay. I love this. Maitland in Orlando.
It's all, we're on the same page, I think. So,
Styptic pencil is used for stopping bleeding. Marco's wiped out again.
Okay. Thank you. These are great comments.
Yeah.
Yes, the Conservative Synagogue in Maitland has a beautiful mikveh. I heard how beautiful it was. Somebody in Boca, I think, asked me about it, and they went and they said it was great, but it is underutilized.
All right.
Ramad Rome took one of the age groups to the Conservative Mikveh in Sandy Spring. That's right. I love that mikveh. Our Rising Tide conference was there last year, and it was great. They did a wonderful job when they built that one. Judy, it takes a strategic plan coming from the RA and USCJ, including Ramah, Schechters, and Hebrew schools. I'm here for that. Whoever wants to work on that strategic plan with me, let's do it. I am so excited about that. Doreen says, I think it's a turnoff that the mikvahs here are only at Orthodox sites. Yeah, where's here, Doreen? Where do you live? Somewhere where there's only Orthodox. Okay.
She's in Canada. She's in Canada.
In Canada? Okay. Toronto actually has a Reform mikvah, but I'm going to take it you're not in Toronto. Okay. Toby asked.
We have a Reform. There's a Reform one in Toronto.
Yeah.
That's where they do our conversions.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think Cincinnati. Or no. Yeah, Cincinnati or Cleveland has a Reform one. Okay, Toby wanted to hear briefly about going to mikvah in the time of COVID. It's very controversial. Some stayed open, some closed, some allowed only married women going on their monthly cycle, some allowed only conversions, some told people to go to outdoor bodies of water, some re-examined the halakha of like public water systems and said, actually, if you take a shower and you do it in a certain way, then you can consider that rainwater, and it's not ideal, but these are difficult times that we're living in, and difficult times have their own halachic categories. And then, rabbis are always afraid of the slippery slope. Well, if you tell people that they can immerse in their bathtub, like Mindy's great grandmother did, then that's what they're going to do, and they won't ever come back. So here we closed. It was really, really difficult. We closed. The message that we sent was that everybody's health and safety was more important than this mitzvah. And we are slowly reopening, and it feels to me like a different institution than the one that I used to run. The place is the same, the love for it is the same, but we can have only 3 immersions a week now, and we used to have sometimes 10 or 15. I think I didn't circle back to tell you how many now we have. We have before COVID, we had about 650 a year, plus another 400 or 500 in educational programs. So we really slammed on the brakes. I mean, life as we knew it just changed overnight in March, obviously. But yes, this is really very impacted. Although, if you know anything about the COVID virus, you know that it's a very weak virus, and water can kill it, and chlorinated or brominated water especially can kill it. And the mikveh does have chlorine in it. So actually being in the water is not an issue. It's just being in the space and getting into that space through the rest of the building with other people. So that's, yeah. Linda Levenstein has a question.
No, actually, it's Marion Tully. I met my daughter's Linda Levenstein.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Anyway, you were going to tell us how it started, because I'm very curious to know.
Oh, okay. In 1989, Rabbi Jeff Goldberg and Rabbi Avis Miller were the rabbis here at Addis Israel. And as more women entered the rabbinate, and as they were sponsoring more conversions and bringing them to the Orthodox mikveh in Silver Spring, Maryland, nearby, they were getting an increasingly cold shoulder from that Orthodox mikveh. So when the conservative male rabbis were coming, it was no big deal. When the conservative women rabbis were coming, it was all of a sudden not so cool. So the Addis board decided, since they were doing a renovation that year anyway, that they would put in a mikveh. And Rabbi Wolberg had to give the clear message to the women of Addis Israel, who were, staunch feminists, and the men as well, were all staunch feminists and very progressive people, that he was not saying that women in this community needed to start observing Nida and separating from their husbands and practicing that monthly rhythm. He was saying, we're building this as a comfortable place for our conversions to take place. And that's what it was at the beginning for so long. It was a place for conversions, and the rest of it, if you had that practice or if you'd heard about it somewhere else, you could do it. You were welcome to do that there, but that was not the focus at all. So that's what happened. Esther Rakusin, this is your childhood synagogue, Addis Israel? I love that. I'd love to show it to you. Come back and I'll show it to you. Oh, I took the entire time talking. I'm sorry. I thought I was going to let you all off the hook earlier. Well, we didn't have to think about the elections for a whole hour and a half. So thank you for being with me. Thank you again to Mindy for inviting me. Debbie, you're doing amazing programming. Karen, thank you for running the tech on all this. And please be in touch with me if you have any questions. I love talking about this, and I'm putting my name in the chat, and you can also ask Mindy for it. And I would love to hear from all of you.
You were going to show that. You were going to show that link. You were going to send it to us.
Yep. Here we go. Here we go. And this is in a whole booklet about mikveh and about our mikvahs. So have fun exploring this booklet. I think it's really cool. I also see my friend Shell Yomahan on this call. I don't see your image, but I see your name here. So Shell, it's nice to see your name.
Thank you, Naomi. This has been a wonderful presentation. I'm so glad you came and could be with us tonight. And thank you to everybody who logged on. Thank you, Debbie, for allowing us to do this, and Rabbi, and everybody who was here to listen. And this will be posted soon, we hope, as soon as everything gets edited. And if you can send the slides and everything so we can put it all together, that would be really terrific.
Happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So everybody stay safe, stay well, wash your hands, more water, wash your hands.